Hello and welcome to another edition of Res Forum Live, coming to you today from just outside the city of Oxford here in the United Kingdom. My name is John Devitt and I will be your host for the next 75 minutes or so. As you may know, if you've joined us before on Res Forum Live, our aim is to combine the functionality of video conferencing that we're all becoming so used to over the last few weeks and months with the immediacy and the interaction and the rich media of live streaming. It allows us to have a really active debate and bring in as many different contributors as possible from all around the world. In fact, we have 150 people who have pre-registered to take part in today's show. So we'll be joined by a panel of global mobility leaders and others from all around the world who will chop and change as we go through the show. And of course, we have our audience on YouTube. If you're joining us on YouTube, please just say hi, let us know you're there. If you've got a question or any comments, please put it up into chat, and then I will bring it into the discussion as we go on. And I'll be looking out for those sort of questions and trying to make sure that I make sure that they go into the role. So as we go through, we'll be having live polls, and we shall be having some breakout sessions. The idea is that we'll be able to allow the debate in greater context in different areas. And then at the end, we'll bring as much of that together as possible and reach some sort of tentative conclusions. Now, the theme of this edition of Res Forum Live is GM Reset. Now, we had a bit of a debate about what exactly that meant, and I'm glad to say that we're joined by one of the people here on our panel, which is David Schofield, Res Forum's strategic advisor, who incidentally was also former Global Mobility and Risk Management Director at PwC, so ideally qualified to tell us exactly what GM Reset actually means. So over to you, David.
Thank you, John, and hello everyone from a very sunny London. The theme of this event, as John's just said, is indeed GM Reset, which is all about how the global mobility industry can emerge from the current crisis and adapt and move to a new future. Now, we in the Res Forum are deliberately using the term reset because we are certain that GM cannot simply restart on the same basis as before the crisis. What will this GM reset model be like? Well, that picture is still taking shape, and indeed today's events like today's will help to fill in the outline. But the Res Forum, drawing on the input of the GM leaders on our strategic advisory board, has been identifying as what we see as some of the possible main elements of the new GM reset model. And we want to kick off today by sharing some of those thoughts. Well, there might be fewer international assignments overall, at least in the near future, but we think there will probably be a greater focus on high quality assignments, which will make a clear contribution to the business and for which selecting the right people with the right commercial and cross-cultural skills will be essential. We do expect the desire to gain international experience still to be there, and this will need to be met in imaginative and different ways. For example, via opportunities for those willing to be on-call nomads, like some of you on this call have been, as part of a global pool. We're sure that duty of care, well-being and family concerns, and clear communication from employers will be high on the agenda for current and prospective assignees. This will put the spotlight on the employee value proposition for international assignments. The Res Forum has done some very helpful and up-to-date research on this, and that's been drawn up by Professor Michael Dickman and Dr. Ben Barder, who are both with us on today's event and will be speaking to us in just a few minutes. One thing we've noticed is that this crisis seems to have actually pushed governments to have been more supportive over cross-border working and visa requirements and so on. And companies and GM teams have shown great flexibility and adaptability over policies and being able to do things differently than in the past. We want this flexibility to continue post-crisis, and I'm sure that you on this call do as well. Innovative technology and much more extensive and integrated digital services will, without a doubt, change the face of global mobility, and we'll be talking about that during today's event. Finally then, overall, we at the RES Forum and the GM leaders and technical partners with whom we regularly speak are optimistic and positive about the future of our industry. Indeed, global mobility leaders have been called upon by business leadership during the crisis to provide key data and to contribute to strategic decisions. So we are sure that this represents a good opportunity for GM to take the reset route to a more strategic role. And on that forward-looking and optimistic note, it's back to you, John, as we look today with global mobility leaders, technical partners, at some of the specific ways our industry can move forward and reset.
Great, thank you very much indeed, David. That has certainly clarified that. And David Enser is another familiar face for those of you from the RES Forum. He also joins us, and he'll be taking now the next, in fact, our first panel discussion, where we're looking at the corporate perspective now. David, if I can hand over to you to take over for the next section.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you very much, David. So yeah, I'm very excited to facilitate this next session for about 15 minutes. We'll be looking at a couple of themes. First of all, how GM leaders have been responding to the crisis, of course, and how GM programs might look different in future. Now, as was mentioned by David Schofield, we'll shortly be publishing a paper which was produced in partnership with EY and written by Michael and Ben on that subject of what's happening now, next, and beyond. We're very pleased to, of course, be joined today by Michael Dickman, who's based in the UK, as is Benjamin Bader. We also have two corporate panelists. I'm very excited that we have Mark Salis, based in the UK. He is AVP of Mobility for Cognizant Technologies. And we have Richard Ma, who's based in Shanghai, and he is HR Business Partner, Global Mobility and GM Controlling Lead for Boga Plastics, Rubber and Plastics in Shanghai. So welcome and thank you for your time. Now, perhaps I can put my first question to you, Richard. Perhaps you can share with us your thoughts on how, your organisation, you as a GM leader, has been responding to this, and also what you've seen elsewhere in Shanghai, of course.
Well, basically, we're not changing too much because the whole global mobility program is still running, but due to the travel restriction, we are not able to send people across the borders. But at this moment, we're still planning to send people when the time is ready, when the border gate are open again. So we're not changing too much.
Okay, so that's the workforce planning is still happening, but of course there are, that practically speaking, that you can't move ahead with moves until circumstances change, of course.
Exactly. What we are doing right now is to wait, and on the other hand, we are doing a lot of preparation, preparing for a better structure, preparing ourselves, and preparing the employees to be more movable. So that's what we are doing right now.
Okay, thank you. Now perhaps I can turn that same question to you, Mark. Obviously at Cognizant, with a huge international employee population, what have you seen in terms of reactions to this, and how has your organisation and other organisations that you observe been responding to this?
Well, my focus, along with I think many other global mobility teams in recent weeks, has been the well-being and situation of our assignees and our business travellers. One of the things that I've found from participating in other networking calls is that it's reassuring also to hear that the issues we faced are no different from many other companies, and we've responded in a similar way to many other companies. What it has shown to us is we realise there are points in the assignment flow where we don't have enough visibility, particularly when people are first starting out. So we've I've certainly seen three main things. One is new arrivals in locations just as lockdowns happened, and their ability to register for official documents, maybe in the US particularly, get a driver's license, and same in Canada, and also be able to find longer term accommodation to get them out of the temporary accommodation. We've also got people wanting to go home. That's more straightforward logistically because most of those people have somewhere to live. They're familiar with their local neighbourhood, but they know where to get their groceries, all those sorts of things. So whilst it can be difficult for them in terms of not being able to get home, particularly if that maybe parts of the family have travelled ahead and you've got families who are separated, basically they are safe, they have somewhere to live, they have money in their pockets. So it's not a sort of so much of a duty of care issue. And then we have those that are displaced, and there's a mixture of things there. So by displaced, I mean people who've maybe gone home for a home leave trip and find they can't then get back to their assignment location. We've had business travellers who've travelled for a few days and find they then can't get home, and they're just not prepared for that, and they clearly are separated from their families. So there's a whole range of issues there that we all see from time to time, but seeing them all together and having to manage it across international time zones and different situations has certainly been challenging. But again, from other calls I've heard, I think we've responded well to that, and no different from many other organisations.
Thank you. So just one clarification on that. Does that mean that you have made distinct policy changes, or have you been publishing new policies, emergency policies, temporary policies to deal with this sort of seismic event where all of these events all of these issues have come together at one point?
Yeah, we've documented a number of different processes and policies, mainly for logistical reasons. As you say, we're a large organisation, so in order to make sure that process-wise, an expense claim that would normally be allowed is go through the system, we will put a policy in place so that we've got the necessary steps there, so it just goes through easily rather than having to manually approve every single exception. So yes, we've written a number of extra policies over the last couple of months, but which has been good also for the profile of Global Mobility, because we have been more of a strategic partner, a proactive partner. We've had direct access to our executive leadership on many issues. So that's positive. Also looking to the future in terms of our seat at the table, discussing things going forward.
Thank you. Perhaps I can then put the same question to Ben and to Michael, our academics, in terms of what you've seen from HR responses to this. Perhaps Michael, you'd like to go first?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, David, and hello, everyone. What we have seen is, first of all, of course, data around what happens now. And Richard and Mark have already outlined some of the key issues of now. Maybe we also saw that people expect more in the companies we surveyed, more health issues and more issues around goal attainment of these and objective attainment of international assignees. So that's the sort of next bit that we need to handle in terms of effectiveness of our global mobility. What's really exciting, we believe, is part of what goes beyond. So in the medium to long-term future, what's happening? And Mark, I thought it was really good that you mentioned it allows Global Mobility Department to be more visible, to have a stronger seat on the table. So the future will actually mean probably a range of things that start with the planning today. And so companies on average plan today to have fewer short-term assignees, fewer long-term assignees, but only to some small effect, and then to a dramatic effect, less business travel and much more virtual work. But what would that mean in terms of the global mobility, how it actually works in organizations? And so in essence, what we believe is that where the data indicates that a substantial number of companies will actually radically change their assignment flows, they should really rethink the why of what they want to achieve in global mobility. So in other words, what will they replace it with? They will probably start to think about local talent more rather than global talent. That has some advantage in terms of, overall fairness and so on, but it will impact on their global leadership development pipeline. There also will be effects around the why when it comes down to what we call control and coordination assignments. So somewhere where you have a senior managers going across to integrate operational units around either processes or culture or both. Okay, this will be, if you really go radical on this, this will have a real effect on how you work your organization. Lastly, there's a range of knowledge transfer implications as well. So if you, right now, you have often knowledge transfer through an individual, but you don't have this individual come back or transfer directly. What you need to do is different sort of technology to capture the knowledge that you want to distribute. So you've got a range of effects here. Ultimately, they're going down to, why do you do this? Do you really want to become more polycentric? Because that would be one effect of an organizational structure. Or do you need to rethink how you then do assignment patterns, where and when? So the range of things that are there in terms of your strategic approach to global mobility in the future.
Thank you. Perhaps just in the interest of time, I'm conscious that we have a time limited session. I could come back to our corporate partners in this at this point and perhaps put the same question to Richard. And of course, you're Shanghai based, so according to some reports, further ahead in this process. So if I was to ask, what you think the future looks like for you, your organization and mobility in China, how would you respond to Michael's points, and would you add anything yourself?
I would definitely hold a strong belief in global mobility. I think it's not going to die at all. Company will see global mobility as a very strategic tool to develop itself, to achieve business goal, to like other gentlemen said, to transfer technology, to transfer knowledge. I think the companies are still going to use it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mark, would you say that you agree with that point? Do you, what's your sort of predictions for the future in terms of the long-term impact of this, both in your ways of working, Cognizant's way of working, and of course the broader industry?
Well, we're already thinking about a shift from mobility of people to mobility of work, and I think that the pandemic has accelerated that mindset. And also seeing more pressure in terms of the so-called work from anywhere approach, and some of the other technology companies like Twitter, you heard about
SAP
work from home, for example. Lots of small digital companies that do this already, where people work from anywhere. But of course, the challenge there is to find a way to do that that aligns with immigration, corporate tax risk, VAT, payroll, social security, all the boring bits, but that matter, unfortunately, from a compliance point of view. And I think it's particularly problematic where you have someone who maybe is doing some work for a country and they want to be on that country's payroll because they've got a higher level of reward in that country. And so I think it may be we need to start our reward colleagues to think more about the value of the work performed should drive someone's salary rather than the location that they're doing it from, and the salary scales in that particular location. I think that'd be kind of a challenge, but that's one way around. But that particular issue, I do see more commuter assignments. We're again with the immigration challenges that we've seen growing. I think certainly I'm seeing in other companies, like a hub and spoke approach, where people would be based in a country that has easier immigration, and then they use business trips into the actual location where they need to do the work. So I think that sort of thing will happen as well. And also on the housekeeping side, I think we're also going to be paying more attention to business continuity going forward, the stability of our vendors, the security of the the money we give to a vendor as part of an expense management program in case they go out of business. Those sorts of things as well, I think, will be higher on the radar, at least over the next couple of years, whilst the pandemic remains in people's minds.
Thank you very much. Fantastic insights. Now, unfortunately, I think we're out of time for you, Ben. I'm sure we'll get back to you either later in this session or on Res Life 3. But in the meantime, perhaps I can flip back to you, John, briefly.
Thank you very much indeed, David. Yes, we've got to try and keep to time, although the great thing about live streaming is that we can be relatively flexible. But at this point, we're hoping to bring in some new panelists and to look at the perspective from the point of view of service providers. So I'm hoping that we're going to be joined by some very significant figures in this world. In fact, I can see them there now. Ben Carter from Icon Relocation, Ginny De Gregorio from EY, and Jacqueline Van Haften from Global Connect. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us. I'll be asking you a few questions in this part of the program. And as I say, we're looking at how service providers have reacted. Ginny De Gregorio, now I understand that you actually are quite a recent expat yourself, so you've had some pretty immediate experience of how it is having to deal with being an expat and the COVID-19 crisis. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so hi, John. Yes, I am part of the UI business, and I work as an advisor in mobility transformation. I've been an expat myself. I transferred from many countries in EMEA in the past 10 years as a single person, as a full family, etc. So I have a very deep personal and professional experience on what a move around Europe could mean. Recently, during this phase of pandemic crisis, we've seen our clients changing their focus, right? Moving from the business as usual more into a crisis management mode, and having to put in place a number of different actions to, let's say, ensure business continuity. Our clients have leaned on us in terms of having support on putting in place the necessary actions to make sure their employees that were maybe stranded abroad in another country had the right support, their policies was ready to adjust and support, for example, emergency repatriation or remote guidelines on how to manage virtual workers, etc. So as a consultant and as advisor, we have changed our way to work with our clients because we had to react and try to be helpful. Also, together with these, there was an overflow of information, and we have tried to channel those in a very appropriate way, try to flex as per our client needs, offering opportunity of, for example, getting direct information on new business and legislation changes and new regulation coming into place. Big team was about clearly compliance and all the compliance issue that maybe a stranded employee working from a location that wasn't the original one's planned could imply. Also providing some help and guidance on the management of remote working, which is not something that every business was ready to do. Ourselves, we are, and I still am, working from home, so we need to try to manage teamwork in an effective way in this new reality.
I think, Ginny, I mean, you're responsible for transforming mobility, at least I think that's your job title. But so I can't resist asking you what is likely to happen in the future. Which of these changes do you think are going to stick around?
Yeah, look, I want to be positive, and I want to think that we will go back to a sort of business as usual, but clearly there will be a change. This pandemic crisis is being a wake-up call for many businesses. There will be two things in my personal view. First, and also as Mark and Michael mentioned before, there would be a more mixed type of mobility. If maybe 6 months ago we're talking about how robots and employee will live together and work together, now we need to consider remote working as well. Also, there will be a change in the way assignments will be planned from an employer perspective, where cost containment and cost management will be right back at the top of the agenda of every business. But also the employee willingness to move. I mean, I think there will be a greater attention to try to keep their family at home. Maybe someone had not very great experience in terms of the healthcare system in the host country, so they want to try to manage their role in a different way. Maybe rather than a long-term assignment, they will prefer a short-term assignment and then try to manage their role with virtual work and also with business travelers. So there will be a different way. Mobility, once again, will be asked to become more strategic and manage a more complex scenario that probably wasn't like that before. If we look at how mobility has evolved in the past 10 to 15 years, is a completely different background. Move are shorter, quicker, and more mixed, and this will be even more relevant for the future. And also mobility strategy perspective. I think all our clients will have to rethink to their mobility strategy, try to make sure it is aligned again with the change landscape for business and talent requirement.
Okay, Ginny, I'm aware of the time, so and I've got Ben and Jacqueline to bring in, but I mean, that's fascinating. Ben, if I can turn to you now, I mean, you're with Icon Relocation, which is a relocation company based here in the UK. I noticed at the front page of your website, you have virtual home search already in place. Without looking too far in the future, because we're going to try and tie things together, I mean, up until now, have you had to make big changes given the things we've been through?
Yes, I think we've been looking at government guidelines both in the UK and overall around the world. I have to say, being part of the Harmony Group has helped us greatly, because we've been able to have owner operators that have responded very quickly, from the fact of PPE on the ground, just the fact that everybody's had to have C19 policies put in place. I know as a management team, we've never spoken so much in the last sort of 8 weeks to put things in place, especially for the new, facilities like Zoom, for instance, and also having our team remotely. So that changes how we do things. But fundamentally, we have to have people on the ground. And for the first thing we did was, how do we protect those people and how do we protect the assignee in the process? So we have come up with a virtual destination services program. And we have to mirror that for certain clients who are willing to pay extra or not pay extra, as it may be. But yeah, it has throwing out a whole lot of challenges throughout the whole process. Just one instance, if you look at the government guidelines for household goods in the UK, they want everybody to clean absolutely every item in the house, including all the personal effects, children's toys. Now, how practically is that going to work? Is that going to work? We all know the pitfalls, and those are the kinds of pitfalls worldwide that we've been dealing with. I have to say, the supply chain has really come into its fore here. The way that they've been able to rally, been able to fulfill what was needed and do it in a safe way. It's challenging. We're not there yet. We're still figuring out some of these services. We're taking guidance from our corporate clients. We're also getting requests for a lot of costings. So obviously people are looking at policies, looking at rejigging their policies. I think Generation C and the way we interact with our potential assignees is going to change. I think there'll be a lot more e-commerce, and at Icon, I can only speak for Icon, we're putting that in place as we speak, so that people can get to us a lot quicker and the process can be a lot simpler. So I'm quite positive for the future, and we've got a lot of cases pending. It's not like every corporate client's gone, we're not going to send anybody, it's just on hold, and we're constantly in contact with the assignees, making sure that they're safe, making sure that they have everything they need, even through to, in the UK, the government are muting with quarantine. Elsewhere in the world, there is quarantine. How do you respond to that if someone does get ill, and then you have to make sure the practicalities of getting them groceries to them? So yeah, it has been challenging. It's been interesting. I'm hoping that we're going to have a little bit of an ease around the world, and the numbers decrease so that we can move around easily. But there are going to be changes. There are going to be policies. We're all going to have to fulfill the need of the client, both from the assignee perspective and the corporate client and the compliance. But in general, it's positive.
Great, thanks, Ben. So finally amongst the panel now, we've got Jacqueline van Haften. Jacqueline, Global Connect deals, I think you're in the Netherlands, incidentally. I should have been asking more people where you are in the Netherlands. I mean, you're dealing with expat partner support. I guess if there are not so many expats moving around, you don't need to have quite so much worry about expat partners, or maybe that's completely the opposite.
Well, first of all, if you look at the changes for us actually nothing changed, which is interesting because we are a full virtual organization from the very start. And more or less coincidentally, because we only work for multinationals who provide a global strategic partner support program. So from the start, we straight away started to serve as partners in over 140 countries, more than 90 nationalities. There's no way you can do that with people on the ground if you want to provide the best support. Because the chance that, especially when you have a broad program, we can help people find a job, set up a business, find voluntary work, find education. If you do that in 140 countries for 90 different nationalities, the chance that the best match for that partner lives around the corner is practically zero. So that's why we started to work virtual. And so for us, actually nothing changed. The requests changed a little bit. There's less job search assistance, obviously, at the moment. We are anyhow helping partners with online education, because if you live in Bujumbura or Lubumbashi, there's also not a university around the corner to do a master. And that's why we know all these online options already. You can study online at Harvard. So the only thing we as a company need is good internet connection. And that's also what partner needs. And I just heard the remark, will families move? I was actually talking about that this morning with the Global Mobility Manager. We think partner support only gets more important because, I think people look differently at leaving their country and live somewhere else.
Okay, Jacqueline, that's fascinating. The two Davids are still with us, but David Ensor, you look like you're itching to have a question. Do you?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Good you noticed.
I didn't notice, David.
I'd probably put a question. You talk about the role of and the relevance of partner support and things like this and spousal options, but the scope, the different services are evolving and changing. Do you expect there to be then some consciously new things, new service lines, new opportunities that you might insert in, as part of your overall offering?
Well, I think for us, the most important at the moment is we had a hard time to convince people it is possible to work with a full virtual organization. A lot of people still think you need brick and mortar to prove that you're doing something which makes sense. Will it change? I don't think a lot will change for what we provide, because we already see, for instance, if you can work in a certain country, then most probably we will still be able to help partners to work. But a recent survey that we did together with RES shows that 70% of the partners, for them, a paid job is actually not the answer to what they're looking for. I think we will it will be easier for us to promote, for instance, as I said, online studying, but also learning a language online. You don't need to have a tutor at home to learn a language. There's digital options. So we are you can't say we are super happy with the situation, but at least I won't have to explain anymore that virtual options can be really good.
Jacqueline and David, I'm going to just draw this section to a conclusion, because we're actually 35. We're now 35 minutes past the hour, and we're now going to move from the vendor perspective and take a look at the role of digital innovation. And David, I'm going to hand over to you again to talk us through this bit. David.
Thank you very much. Before we do this, actually, I'd like to pull up, Ken, can you work your magic and pull up a quick polling question? We've talked about digital priorities, and Mark was shared with us some views on policies and digital evolution. But Ken, can you pull up a quick poll for us? If people could just answer this question first, which of these is the most important digital priority right now in GM for your organization? We're going to leave that open for just a few seconds, and then that should come away. And what we're going to do with all of these polls, of course, we're going to bring these back. There's going to be a couple of polling questions in a second, later on, and then we'll come back to those polls at the end. Now, again, as I said, you know, for those who know me and for those who know Res Forum, for the last probably 18 months since I made the decision to leave Adidas and really sort of seek to take Res on the journey that we've taken it on, one of our longest held ambitions has been to develop a fifth pillar of our business. You know, of course, events, which we've had to move to virtual events now, with the second of these being the call we're on now. Research. We do lots of research, including the very excited COVID-19 response paper. And there we have the results. Duty of care, 36%, employee experience 40%, and managing increasingly complex compliance 24%. Just to define increasingly, remember what Mark said, all of the constantly changing rules. How do you wrap legislation around the pandemic so an increasingly diverse workforce working you know, in a remote range of locations? I guess these are going to be the challenges that both corporates and, of course, the likes of EY and everyone else are going to have to come to terms with. But coming back to Res Forum's evolution, you know, we do events and we've done our research. We have our analytics, risk and policy analytics, and of course our e-learning and change management offerings. And the fifth one was really somewhere I wanted to take Res Forum. And it's very exciting to be able to announce just very, very briefly here for 1 minute that we have begun that journey. We are in a very exciting partnership with INEO Global Mobility, based in the US. We have been developing the concept of connected GM. Now, I think we believe that the future of global mobility is fully connected. And if we could just go up one, please, Ken. So we believe that the conversation has changed. Duty of care, complex compliance, and employee well-being and employee experience come to the fore. And that's why new digital solutions are needed to problems, both old problems and new problems. So, you know, we feel that the future is connected. What does that mean? Well, of course, there's going to be all of those traditional things that we need, you know, compensation, tax management, different kinds of policies determining different kinds of compensation approaches. And that's what INEO already has in their tech suite solution. But of course, Connected GM is so much more than that, and it's a very exciting journey to be on. I haven't got the time to share too much now, of course, but beginning to look at Destination 8 information and beginning to think how that destination information is sourced is going to be very relevant. Of course, relocation services perhaps moving increasingly online. You know, Richard and Mark already alluded to this. Interestingly, of course, it was already mentioned by Ben about VR solutions, digital video, how that can play into the future relocation value proposition. And then, of course, all of the other good stuff, expense management. Again, Mark mentioned how that's changing and evolving. Travel trackers, so how we track and manage an increasingly diverse range of employment constructs. I'm not just talking about traditional expats, but you know, all sorts of different virtual workers, business travelers, commuters, the Posted Workers Directive, of course, in the EU. And then finally, with an automated tax engine, all of this is overlaid by themes around automation, robotics, and making these processes easier. All I'll say is if you'd like to learn more, you will see more coming out of Res Forum, of course, over the next month. Weeks and months. And in the meantime, if you haven't done it already, please do sign up to be a Res Forum member. Go to our analytics, and because we can make you a bespoke suggestion as to how we feel Connected GM can transform your GM approach. If you complete the risk analytics tool, it takes about 20 to 30 minutes, and from that we will be in touch about how we think Connected GM can work for you. Now, on that note, I think we have, before we go into the next session, which is going to be a split session. We have a couple more polling questions, as I recall, John and Ken. So if we might have a look at those before we start dividing people up.
That's right. Thank you very much indeed, David. Here's the first question that you can see has been brought up. That's looking ahead over the next 12 to 18 months. Which of these do you think best represents the likely future shape of GM programs? So if you're on YouTube, you can just leave your comments in the YouTube chat there, and I'll bring those in later. But for those joining us on our panels, you can click now and we'll have the result of that pretty swiftly.
We're going to have those poll results, I think, at the end of the session after the breakout rooms. And I think there's there's just one more polling question as well, as I recall.
That's right, the second polling question, which we'll just wait for that to come up because it takes a little bit of time. Here we are, here it is. Looking ahead over the next 12 to 18 months, which of these do you think will be the most important factor on the minds of prospective assignees? So the other perspective there. And again, those of us on our panels, please vote now. And we'll bring those results back to you towards the end of the program when we draw everything together. Thank you, David. We're now going to move on and do a bit of a split here because some of the panel will move into breakout sessions. And here on YouTube, we will stay up for you to listen to the rest of the program. Just before we do that, I'm going to play a short video which will give you some ideas about the themes we're likely to be looking at. Okay, and here are this is the theme of the YouTube session. What changes can we expect in what service providers offer? So if you can leave your comments on YouTube chat, then we will be able to bring those to you as we go through this session. But coming back to our panelists, I can see a selection of people there, but including Liz Jovich, who is certainly one of those people meant to be joining us at the moment. Liz, thank you very much indeed from WBN. That's International Employee Benefits, Employee Health, and those sort of things. Joining us, I think, from the US. Is that correct?
Washington, D.C. metro area.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Yes, exactly. So, Liz, I mean, from a service provider's perspective, I mean, I don't know how much you've been watching and listening up until this point. What's the perspective from over there in the US? How are you finding things?
Well, I mean, like everywhere else, we're just trying to take this one day at a time and figure out what the next steps are for coming out of the crisis. But as we really look at kind of the role of the broker and consultant and how that will evolve as we emerge from the crisis, I really kind of look at this in two different categories. So what are we going to start doing and what are we going to continue doing? I think the first thing that we'll see brokers start doing is expanding their offering and expertise beyond simply the buying and placement of insurance. Generally, I would argue that our customers are looking for a single resource, a single point of knowledge for all things related to employee benefits, including those that fall outside of the scope of insurance. So we'll see the expertise of the employee benefits consultant expand into such areas as well-being, especially mental well-being, and programs like that, flexible benefit programs, technology and analytics services, and then finally the intersection between employment law, tax law, and employee benefits offerings, which is something that we don't always see today in the global consulting arena. And then additionally, as I know many of you are experiencing, the globally mobile workforce continues to expand at a rapid rate. And the result of this, I believe, is that the broker or consultant of the future will shift their services to start providing more focus on helping organizations to meet their duty of care obligation. I think historically we've seen a strong delineation between the risk management or property and casualty side of our business and the employee benefits side. But as the COVID crisis has shown us, there's an incredible amount of overlap and intersection between these two areas when managing a business, especially if that business has globally mobile employees. So I think that this focus on duty of care, particularly for that globally mobile workforce, will start to blur the lines between the traditional risk management focus and the traditional employee benefits into an integrated, globally focused approach to protecting the business and its employees. And then finally, what will we continue to do? I think that the employee experience will continue to be a point of focus for brokers and consultants moving forward. As we look at key surveys and research pieces that are released each year, we continue to see trends of employers looking for ways to enhance the employee experience as a method of attracting and retaining talent. And employee benefits are a vital element in ensuring a cohesive employee experience. And the COVID crisis has made this extremely evident, and we'll continue to see this as a strategic offering of many benefits consultants and brokers.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Liz. I see Damon Ward has just managed to join us. I hope I haven't caught you too early, but Damon, thank you very much indeed for joining us from INEO. I think you're in Denver, would that be correct?
No, I'm in the UK.
That's right. That's Denver near, yes. Exactly.
Denver near Reading, yes.
But anyway, thanks for joining us all the way from the UK, which is not that far. But so as far as INEO is concerned, I mean, INEO, of course, is a GM software company, really, dealing with compensation, talent management, etc. I mean, how have you find things, and how have you think things are going to change now, given the situation we're in?
I think it was interesting actually listening to Michael's comments earlier on, and that was without any kind of collaboration, where he was talking about knowledge distribution via technology. And obviously, as far as the Connected GM initiative is concerned, that's something that we're very much looking at. I mean, I think from the technology perspective, now more than ever before, there's going to be a far greater collaboration between the technology providers and the end users, be them RMCs or corporate clients, as it were. And I think to that point, in terms of the sharing of knowledge and defining client needs, the need to actually engage with subject matter experts on both sides within an organization. And again, some contributors have been speaking about how the profile of the GM function has raised during the current crisis. And I think the need for technology platforms and associated support to be able to show and demonstrate its value to an organization and across functions is vitally important now. So as I say, getting those subject matter experts in as soon as possible to ensure the product, the service offering is, what is needed throughout the group is critical, I believe.
That actually follows on rather well from what David was saying earlier. David, do you have a follow-up question on that?
Yeah, well, I think it's perhaps less of a follow-up question, but more of an observation. I think this theme, Damon, you and I have talked about this an unhealthy amount, of course, over the last months as we've collaborated on developing this concept of Connected GM, but the concept is connectivity, of course. There are a great range of technology providers out there, but being able to cherry pick the best of different technologies and bring them all together into a comprehensive platform which answers an ever-evolving list of questions, of challenges, of problems that we have to face as GM leaders. Of course, for me, that's the heart of the matter on this topic. Without wishing to deflect, I think we also have Liz Portala on from Sterling Lexicon. Liz, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, and I apologize. For some reason, my camera is not working for Zoom today. But yeah, I think we wanted to just talk a little bit about how we're delivering services differently, and the fact that our assignees and transferees are very concerned about cleanliness and sterile environments. So how do we move forward and take care of our folks that we're relocating? So for instance, with temporary living, deep cleans between stays, reducing or elimination of things like maid service, which are common in our space. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but in terms of like household goods, how do we keep our crew safe? How do we keep our safe? And, digital is part of this. So no more unpacking, for example, no more touching every item. Transferees can leave a map of where they want, or assignees can leave a map of where they want things to be placed, with videos supporting the fact that, these are your belongings that are getting delivered and where they need to go. Photos of proof of delivery, for example. I mean, these are things that we're going to need to do differently in order to continue to move forward with these movements of belongings, but keeping everyone safe, right? We talked a little bit about area orientations earlier, and is it going to be possible in the next 6 to 12 months to have a destination service provider in the car with the employee and their spouse or partner? Is that going to be feasible, or what's the new norm going to look like? A digital tour, phone calls, Zoom meetings to talk through the properties. And I think, in terms of when I think about how we're supporting our engagements as an organization, we've got to move away from face-to-face meetings for a while. So virtual best and finals, virtual implementation meetings, virtual client reviews, so that we're getting the work done and we're getting the information in front of our clients in a way that's meaningful but safe, right? So, and then I think finally, Dave, real quickly, in terms of strategy moving forward, spending this time now helping our clients reimagine what the future is going to look like in terms of different types of assignments, different types of needs for folks that are working remotely in locations supporting, businesses in other countries. What does it mean from a tax perspective, compliance? What does it mean from an immigration perspective? And really thinking from an agile perspective moving forward versus more of a guideline perspective moving forward versus a fixed sort of, here's our policies, let's just make some adjustments. So that's kind of where we're thinking at this point, and it's moving and changing weekly.
Thank you. But can I just jump in there perhaps with another question? It's maybe slightly mean question, and it can be to any of our panelists, the two Liz's and to Damon. Somebody once said, it may have been Winston Churchill, that never waste a good crisis. Now you must have seen in the ways that you engage with your clients, you're forced to innovate, you're forced to think quickly, you're forced to challenge yourselves to do great things in a remarkable short period of time under great pressure. But through that, can you see any of the things that you've been doing actually being beneficial in the long term, even when the world returns to normal, in inverted commas? Is there anything that you think is with us here to stay because it makes more sense than the way that we did things before?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it was just touched on a little bit earlier. I think it was Ginny maybe that said it, that, we need to think about working more smartly. We need to look at different types of ways to support our communities more cost effectively, more efficiently. And if this means that we're going to lean on things like language training digitally or virtually, if we're going to do more work with cultural training, some of these things that historically were very face-to-face, in-person, costly, not agile in terms of when you could experience that training, for example, I think it's going to force the issue in a lot of our areas where we're supporting our assignees and transferees. So yeah, I think it's positive in many ways. I do think it's very stressful, though, for organizations that can't predict their revenue and can't predict what it's going to look like over the next 12 months. And goes back to some of those questions around, how many companies are really going to be jeopardized financially by this and not be able to come back. So it's a whole other element that's on the negative side, but I do think there are many positive things coming out of this.
Thank you, Liz. So same question again, perhaps to Liz or to Liz Jovic or to Damon.
Yeah, I think, as a sort of as a service provider, but sort of from a technology perspective, what I have found is that, we've got clients and would-be clients coming to us, and we're having a far greater sort of dive into the needs and perhaps posing some questions as to why a client wants something done in a particular way, rather than just provide an out-of-the-box solution and say, off you go and play with it. And I think for us, that's important. And I guess for any of, anybody in this arena, whereby, we look at how that might apply for the specific client need, but then how that can help other clients as well. So for me, I think this environment is leading perhaps to better conversations and a deeper questioning of what the client needs actually are.
Well, that can only be a good thing if that, of course, stays, Damon. Liz Jovic, how about you? Anything that jumps out in your mind?
Yeah, I'll just round out the conversation by, saying the insurance industry has historically been very siloed. So you've got your medical insurance, your life insurance, your business interruption insurance, your labor accidents or workers' compensation insurance. I think what the crisis has done is shown the need for those to integrate and work together, and highlighted the need for really effective employee communication. And that's been an opportunity that our firm has, seen and jumped on, is let's push out some easy to digest communication that both employees and HR managers or GM managers can use and leverage to help make sure that their employees are well protected.
Thank you, Liz. Now, better late than never. Perhaps I can jump for a question to Ben. Benjamin, obviously, Dr. Ben Barder, professor at Newcastle University Business School. Now, what's your take on this in terms of the impact and the long-term supply chain? You've heard the rationales from Damon and the two Liz's, but is there anything you would add?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, in terms of what's going to happen in the future, we have a rough idea what could happen, but there's certainly a lot of uncertain variables. I think the most important point right now is to, and I agree what's been said, there's lots of opportunities. And so we really should consider the future GM strategy. So picking up Michael's initial why we should do that, also look at the question of how. Because this is a great chance. Looking at previous research, a lot of things that are really relevant now. We've been doing research on that, and we've observed that in the REST forum in other contexts. And COVID, for various reasons, was a catalyst for this development, I think. And now it is the time to seize that opportunity and become more proactive. So get away from this reactive moment to a more proactive approach.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think very much Michael phrased it in a recent paper that I was reading. He said, making important decisions, not in a time of crisis, but maybe also then when things return, you can still have those important discussions, and you can maybe take a more balanced view, of course, on some of these difficult discussions. So for me, that was something that stood out. Okay, good. Thank you very much, guys. I'd say a huge thank you. I think we're just a few seconds off coming back into the bringing everyone back together, John. Is that correct?
That's correct. Very good timing. You're actually a couple of seconds early, which is completely unforgivable in the live stream. But this is the nature of live broadcasting. So we're going to wait for the rest of our colleagues and panelists, etc., to come back. Well, while we're doing that, I'm going to play that video again so that you can, those people who are watching on YouTube live, incidentally, those of you on the panel, I apologize, you won't be able to see this, but trust me, it is going out on YouTube live. And this is just to, go over some of the issues that we will have been talking about, and we'll come back at the end of this and we'll draw all the strands together and we'll try to reach some sort of tentative conclusions.
Yeah, good. I just want. And with Jonathan,
there we are. So that's some of the ideas that we'll have been discussing, and we can hear in more detail now, because as you can see, we've been joined by several of the people who've been in breakout sessions, including David Schofield, who I think can draw some of the strands together. So I'm going to hand over to you, David, to take over for this section. David.
Sure. Thank you, John, and welcome back everyone from the different breakout groups you've all been in. What I want to do, in fact, is to invite our two breakout room hosts on the Zoom side, that's Andy and Jose, to give a report as to what went on in their groups. And perhaps, Jose, I can start with you, and you could give us, perhaps in a few minutes, the key points that your group talked about in terms of the situation for our corporate guests today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, David. So I think on question one, which was what changes might we see in the future around global mobility program structure, policies and benefits, I think probably one of the key things that we focused on was probably new global mobility policy design. And we focused quite a lot on this concept of virtual assignments, whereby individuals maybe stay located in their, let's say, their home country, but carry out an assignment on behalf of another entity, which I think we all recognise is something we've kind of heard of and has been around, but we probably haven't necessarily been very involved in setting these up and understanding, well, what does it mean from a compliance perspective, a virtual working perspective, etc., etc. So Emery made some very interesting comments from Unilever around agreeing that virtual assignments had really come to the fore over the last few weeks. And a requirement to really look at the compliance assessments around them. So from a tax, corporate tax, immigration structure, looking at, asking wider questions around which entities benefiting from the work and these kinds of things. And when we discussed, do we see this as a short-term fix, perhaps, as borders remain closed and obtaining visas continues to be difficult? I think the feeling was it's likely to be a longer-term requirement to really assess the need for these types of virtual assignments as an alternative to the traditional moves, and hence really building up much more structure and framework around these to enable proper planning and these kinds of things. And Ben from ICON, Ben Carter, was also mentioning around what he's seen as a number of new policy design inquiries from clients, which I thought was interesting, and some larger clients wanting more bespoke service arrangements as well. So we didn't touch on that in a huge amount of detail, but I think perhaps with things like high touch becoming important from an employee well-being perspective, really looking at service delivery model to understand, well, look, are there enough touch points? Is well-being of assignees' families being properly catered for, and should we be re-looking at those models going forward?
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, that makes sense. Did you get any ideas from the people in your room about really radical changes? Anyone talking about major threats to mobility programs generally? Because the tone so far in this meeting has been very upbeat, I'm glad to say. I just wondered if there are any voices of real concern out there.
No, none, and we probably didn't discuss that point. But I think probably there is. We have to accept there's a challenge to the traditional long-term assignment model. Yeah. But at the same time, these alternative forms of mobility, arguably are as complex or even more complex, and the skill set that global mobility needs to bring to navigate the challenges are, I think, equally as complex. So I think there's many opportunities for mobility to demonstrate value and assist the organisation, albeit in slightly different forms.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Jose. Andy, perhaps I can turn to you just to pick up first on anything you want to add to that in terms of addressing that first theme about likely changes in program structure and policies, and then we'll perhaps move on to the other question about how GM teams will operate in the future.
Yeah, I think the thing that came out from my group was an element of industry specific and how talent is deployed, and the objectives of deploying talent. So Brigitte of Doka construction company based out of Austria, their talent at the moment is very much concentrated in the mothership and headquarters, and therefore assignments are used to deploy these experts into the locations. And what they've realised, what it's accelerated, is a known problem, which is actually that knowledge should reside much more and be established much more strongly in each location. So therefore, it's less almost about assignments and more about a culture of knowledge transfer and knowledge and where it's located and how you get it into these locations.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting. But then equally supported by Mark Salis, who works within the IT sector, Cognizant, what he said was, look, like DOCA, we'll always need certain specialists to go in at a certain moment in time. These are just skills that reside in a person who coincidentally is in a certain location, and that won't change. So therefore, there will be a need for assignment types. But what they both said, which was very interesting, was there'll be more questions asked before an assignment is deployed. There'll be really, really rigorous, as going through a lot of tests, check and challenge, and then once you know that, that's when it'll happen. Cost containment will be a factor, either opportunistically or just as a matter of fact. But as we know, the rule of thumb, assignments are expensive, so questioning that again. With some great inputs from Ginevra of UI, who said, obviously she's an expert in deployment, but she's also part of a program, and she remains very optimistic about the need for mobility, like Jose's group. People need to be deployed, and that's very much the kind of the view of UI.
And actually, can I ask you then, Andy, to move it on, maybe building on that, in terms of, did you get any feel in your group for how GM teams themselves might have to be operating differently, organize themselves differently in future? Because we talked about how programs will change. What about the teams?
So where we kind of got to with this debate was, it was almost what I would describe as GM transformation, sort of phase 2. All the themes are the same that we've heard in the last 10, 15 years about, utilising technology and becoming even more strategic in outlook and understanding and contribution. Because as Jose says, short-term deployment is arguably, and pulling people in and out on a short-term basis is arguably more complex than a more traditional long-term assignment. So suddenly the skill set remains valid. Where I would like to have steered a discussion, and we ran out of time, was, do we actually think the role of GM will be GM? Will we have this kind of transformed talent deployment, talent acquisition, talent management / GM hybrid roles going forward, where GM might not exist in itself per se, but it'll be such a key part of another role, and those other roles will have to be able to handle the technicality of that. So often you talk talent acquisition, they're great at a certain thing, but I wouldn't say all of the GM skills are their strengths. But maybe your starting point is a GM person who becomes a talent acquisition person or a talent deployment.
I guess, Andy, that brings us back to one of the things we said at the start about making an advantage of this crisis and building towards this more strategic role for GM that we talked about, to be honest, in these forums for a long time. Andy, thanks for that. Just conscious of the time here. Jose, I just wondered if there's anything more you wanted to add from your group about future organisation of GM teams.
Maybe just a couple of quick points. So Jacqueline raised some interesting points around a potential shift in the mindset around, much more flexibility of how people work, when, and hopefully a view that there would be more acceptance of people working maybe a bit more independently as a product of the current situation. And we discussed around, perhaps with things like quiz nights and game evenings, are people comfortable about this kind of blurring of the boundaries between kind of work and social? So there was some interesting views on that. And there was a view from Emery from Unilever that actually she didn't see a huge change in terms of the structure of teams as a result of the current crisis. How working works. I think it's maybe around continuing to have a tolerance for ambiguity, and that's always something that we've been very used to having.
Indeed, indeed. Andy, Jose, thanks very much indeed for bringing those insights back into the whole meeting. I think what we'd like to try and do in the next 5 minutes or so is bring together the main themes from this whole event. We've covered an awful lot of ground, amazingly, in an hour and 10 minutes. It's the amount of things we've covered has been very impressive. Could I turn to Ben maybe first and then to Michael? I know you guys have not only been participating, but you've been helping by making a note of what you see as the maybe one or two key themes that have emerged out of this whole event. Ben, could you highlight one or two key messages that you're taking away from this yourself?
Absolutely. So technically, from observing the whole thing, I mean, research-wise, I feel like a kid in a candy store. It's been really interesting. There's so many things going on. If I have to summarize two key points from the earlier part of this whole session, I think duty of care is one of the most important things we need to be looking at in terms of what has been done so far and how it can be adapted. And the other underlying theme is probably digitization, anything related to that, how to manage people, leadership, how to manage processes and everything. And what I think is really, really interesting to take away, and that pretty much relates to what I think Andy said, what's complex and how you can deal with that. I think every company needs to look at everything that's relevant from the question, is it complex or is it complicated? Because these are two different things. And differentiating between complex things and complicated things and how they can be managed will probably be very, very crucial in the future. And then to reiterate what I stated before, GM needs to get away from reactive to proactive, because this crisis has a lot of opportunities.
Okay, so that makes sense, and that's consistently coming through. Michael, your views on key takeaways from today.
Conscious of time, so thanks, Ben, for picking up some really important points. This was a really exciting session, like a kid in the candy store, you said, Ben. This was really nice. Let me just add one, therefore, and that was Mark's point, which struck a chord with me: mobility of people versus mobility of work, because we really linked to that in many of the sessions, whether it was talking about virtual work and the more trust and flexibility we need, or anything like that. So my thing about why do we have mobility and how will we structure it, that's connected to this mobility of people versus mobility of work idea.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And that really is a very fundamental point. And we were getting today, I think, at some really strategic things about the future of global mobility, but against a very positive background, I think.
Could we
guys,
perhaps just pull up the poll?
David, please, you jump in at this stage before we wrap up.
Sure. Could we just pull up the poll results from questions?
Of course. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So we see for question 1 here, of course, looking at the outlook for the next 12 to 18 months, the likely future shape is 78% predict a somewhat changed model with few assignments and a greater focus on fit-for-purpose business-driven assignments. And perhaps now the next one as well, please, Ken. And in terms of looking out for the next 12 to 18 months, what will be the most important factor on the minds of prospective assignments? It's quite a clear win there: duty of care issues, employee protection programs, health and family considerations. I think, particularly on that last one, family considerations, that certainly lends itself to the discussion we had, of course, the points raised from Jacqueline Van Haften, not of Global Connect, as John said, but Global Connection. And I think you very much spoke about the impact and, of course, the opportunity, as well as the risks inherent with moving with partners and the new realities that are emerging there. So thank you for that. I think we are out of time. So at this point, David, I will pass straight back to you.
No, thank you, David, and thanks for bringing up those poll results. I'd just like to add very briefly that apart from the points that have just been mentioned, I was struck by the emphasis throughout on integrated services, and that applied on the corporate side and also from a number of our technical partners. And taking advantage of opportunities was a theme that came throughout today, which I think is very positive for the future. Well, that's where I think we better wrap up for now. I'd like to say my thanks for everybody's participation in this event, both our corporate members and our technical partners and our guests. It's been a tremendous bringing together, I think, across our industry. So thanks from me, from the RES Forum. And John, I'd like to hand back to you, thanking you for your excellent services and for you to wrap up and close out today's session.
Thank you very much, both Davids. My apologies to Jacqueline. Global Connection. It did actually appear on her caption correctly, but the presenter always gets these things wrong in live streaming. But I think that's been a brilliant session. I'm going to move back onto this wide screen here. This is our the perspective that you get from the control room. You can see the different screens. May I say thanks to everybody, and I hope you've enjoyed this edition of Res Forum Live. Of course, the COVID-19 crisis has already proved to be very unpredictable, and I'm sure that it will continue to be so, providing a very dynamic situation for global mobility. And be sure that we will keep you up to date with every sort of development that happens. So thank you for watching, and also thank you for participating. If you can think of any changes, any new things that you'd like to see, leave that with us in your feedback, and keep a lookout for the next edition coming in June. But for now, goodbye and stay safe.